I am the Indian voice. Listen to me.
My first encounter with Leonard Peltier was in November 1975. I was crossing the border from Ontario into New York. Border agents went through my things and called the FBI. Why? Because I was a long-haired foreigner traveling with American Indian books, photographs, tapes, addresses, and the FBI was looking for an Indian, Leonard Peltier. The FBI requested that I be retained until the next morning one of their men could question me. So my fingerprints were taken and I spent the night at the Malone County Jail. The following day, an agent was waiting for me. "Klaus," he said, "if one of your uncles was killed, you would like to see revenge. You want to find the murderer. And that's what happened to us. The FBI is a big family, and 2 of our uncles were killed. So we want to find the killer, and perhaps you can help us."
Sometimes, in the shadowed night, I become spirit. The walls, the bars, the gratings dissolve into light, and I unloosen my soul and fly through the inner darkness of my being. I become transparent, a bright shadow, a bird of dreams singing from the tree of life.
Yes, 2 FBI agents were killed on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation on June 26, 1975. The shootout occurred during the so-called Reign of Terror that followed the occupation of Wounded Knee. More than 60 Indian opponents of the tribal government were killed, the murders never solved. During those years, the FBI had stationed a large number of their special agents on Oglala Lakota land.
There were a lot of agents in field gear, camouflage. Everybody on their side had automatic weapons.
At that time, most of the traditional people on Pine Ridge believed that the FBI targeted the AIM Indians, as they were called, and overlooked crimes committed by Wilson and by his followers. George O'Clock, the special agent in charge of the Rapid City office, once told me some years later that the FBI got its SWAT team from Pine Ridge, that during this period of 73 to 76, the FBI used Pine Ridge as a SWAT training ground for as many as 2,600 FBI agents. That was a period of only 3 years, and that's when most of the abuses took place.
The fatal shootout took place on the Jumping Bull family ranch, where many AIM activists were living.
So when they spoke about the shootout, they said it was 30 well-trained, well-armed guerrillas. Well, that had nothing to do with reality, and that never got corrected.
2 agents and 1 Indian died that day. 3 arrest warrants were quickly issued, Leonard Peltier's name on one of them. Law officials arrested the other 2 Indians, Dino Butler and Bob Rubidoux. They were tried in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and here comes the irony. Despite the largely white jury, the 2 Indian activists were acquitted. They had acted in self-defense. Had Leonard been part of that trial, he would be a free man today. But he went to Canada.
I was working with some people from Kamloops, British Columbia, and they had gathered a number of items to donate to a small boys camp, clothing and food products and stuff like that. And we were going to meet another Indian brother, and we were supposed to meet her. That's the reason why we stopped at Small Boys, to let them know that we had all these items to donate to them, right? That was given for donation.
Royal Canadian Mounted Police caught up with Leonard Peltier in a remote Indian village in the Rocky Mountains.
Next morning they came and arrested me. And one of what's so ironic about it is that I've learned later that see, my grandfather came from the Metis, the Michifs, or what we call them. And some of those people that was out there, Yellowbird, that was the medicine man or spiritual advisor up there, was a relation of my grandfather's.
The FBI requested his extradition based on an affidavit by Myrtle Poorbear, an Indian woman who had never met Peltier in her life. FBI agents extracted the affidavit by sequestering Poorbear for days. They showed her grisly photographs of Aname Ekwash, an Indian activist who had been shot in the back of the head. Akwash's hands were sawed off and sent to FBI labs for identification purposes. Poorbear later remembered, "They showed me certain parts of her body that were decomposed. They said that's how I was going to end up if I didn't cooperate with them. They said they could kill me and get away with it. I was very scared. I got to a point where I believed they would do it."
For me, I've seen them as an out-of-control agency. I've seen them, and what is interesting is if they can get away with it with us, they can get away with it with anyone, because they've set the laws, they set the precedences, they built more prisons, they use the same type of tactics.
Let us forgive the worst among us, because the worst is in ourselves. The worst lives in each of us, along with the best. Let us forgive the worst in each of us and all of us, so that the best in each of us and all of us may be free.
Poorbear's false affidavit made Peltier's extradition possible. She testifies that she was Leonard's girlfriend and that she was at the shootout and she saw Peltier pull the trigger on the agents.
I have to be very clear with you, I have a very biased view. The man stood between me and bullets. And that puts a certain kind of way you look at someone who is willing to do that for you. And it's interesting because Leonard is a very playful person. And if you didn't, people who have come to know him since his incarceration, they may or may not know that about him. He's the kind of guy who, it doesn't matter, anything anybody would ask him to help, he would do.
Leonard's trial in Fargo, North Dakota was a farce of equal nature. The judge forbid the introduction of any testimony from the Cedar Rapids trial or any evidence concerning the role of the FBI during the reign of terror. The judge maintained that Peltier was on trial, not the FBI. Leonard was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms.
There were papers that were in one of the agents' briefcase, and I really don't remember which one of the 2 agents it was. When we were going to trial in Cedar Rapids, I worked as a paralegal on the case, and we were allowed to look at the evidence. And one of the things that was in one of the agents' briefcase was a whole aerial photograph of our encampment and marked with who was where. And I still believe to this day that the goal there was that they were supposed to come in and kill us all.
Most people see the world as taking sides. I don't. And I don't believe that you have to take sides to serve in the government. As an illustration, the whole time that I was Attorney General, the highest civil rights enforcement priority was the prosecution of police and prison guards who abused the rights of citizens. And the pronounced reason was very clear. Who protects the people when the police violate the law? Now that's direct action through government to prosecute people in government, police, FBI agents who violate human rights.
Despite the trial's procedural irregularities, falsified evidence, perjured testimony, and although prosecutors have since admitted that they have no idea who shot the agents, and although Peltier's verdict has been dropped from first-degree murder to aiding and abetting, he is still sentenced to prison for life, and his every request for retrial has been denied.
Peltier may die in prison. I don't think he will. But this will go down as probably the worst cases of wrongdoing and illegal wrongs committed by the FBI in gaining a conviction against an American Indian Movement member.
The government can and ought to protect human rights, but the governments are the principal violator of human rights, overwhelmingly. And ironically, you know, all the fear and cry about terrorism, the vast majority of all terrorist activity in the world is committed by governments. The idea of the reign of terror was a government terrorizing the people.
Peltier was initially incarcerated at the highest maximum security prison in the country, Marion, Illinois. Strangely, in 1979, he was moved to Lompoc Prison in California, a school campus compared to Marion. His Indian cellmate told him that prison officials had offered him a reduced sentence if they would attempt an escape.
Well, I have to be very careful about what I say about this because the retaliation from the Bureau of Prisons for revealing anything, they still retaliate with punishment. So I have to, you know, either I can go ahead and tell you everything that happened there and end up in ADX where I'll be locked up 24 hours a day, or I can just tell you the highlights of it, you know.
No,
I know that I know that the guy that told me that he had been hired to assassinate me proved it to me by showing me that first he had indictments out on him for shooting some Chicago cops. After he had told me this and had the FBI drop those charges, which they don't do here in the United States, or any country as far as I'm aware. They don't drop the charges for shooting cops. And he showed me to prove that he was not lying, that they had dropped the charges. I seen the dismissal of charges by the government. I was convinced, you know. It was enough for me.
The reason for his change of prison now became clear to Leanard. They wanted to shoot him escaping. He had nothing to lose, so he took the risk. Guns fired, but killed his cellmate. Leanard escaped and remained on the loose for 6 days. A farmer discovered him in a melon field and called the sheriff's office. Alerting the FBI from his car, the sheriff drove to the field, found Leanard and arrested him. An agent of the FBI arrived with a drawn gun.
They had me laying on the ground. This deputy sheriff, young deputy sheriff, had me laying on the ground, was sitting on me and handcuffing my hands behind. And he was shaking, he was scared. And the FBI agent laid right down in front of me, put that AR-15 right within, a foot from my face. And I looked in his eyes and he said, "You killed my friends." He says, "I'm going to kill you."
There will be no shots fired in my presence, the sheriff said. If the FBI had beaten the sheriff to the scene, Leanard would be a dead man today.
He said, "No, I'm not going to be part of no killings." I changed my mind. And the FBI agent looked up at him, anger, disgust. You know.
So this sheriff saved your life at that moment?
Yeah. Of course, he got up in the stand when we went to trial for the escape and denied it, but him and I know what happened. And I'm grateful to him.
Leanard Peltier's spirit remains unbroken. He learned to paint, and the sale of his pictures pays his legal fees. And he is a writer. In September 2000, when Dick Bancroft and I visited him, he gave us a poetry reading.
I am everyone who ever died without a voice, or a prayer, or a hope, or a chance. Everyone who ever suffered for being an Indian, for being human, for being indigenous, for being free, for being other, for being committed. I am every one of them. Every single one. Yes, even you. I am every one.
When you go through the various checkpoints within the prisons, from Marion to Springfield to Leavenworth, Marion really being ominous, you are depressed because of all the clanging of the bars and the procedures that the jailers put you through. Each time, the joy in his face to have visitors was disarming. I didn't know how to react to it. It was almost like we were meeting at a party.
You got fancy shoes.
Ah, they're about 20 years old.
Oh, he had them on last time he had them on.
They're wearing out, man. Don't let me get on new ones.
His warmth and genuine happiness to see people from the outside that were his friends. Bear in mind that we were not friends of his before he was locked up. We became friends through telephone conversations in the early days and then with these visits. But each time he left us with this marvelous feeling of warmth and caring and love and concern for the welfare of not only his people on the outside, but all of us. And when we left, we were invigorated and we walked out with our heads up. And it was the first time that I'd ever had somebody behind bars give me a lift.
We are not separate beings, you and I. We are different strands of the same being. You are me and I am you. And we are they and they are us. This is how we're meant to be. Each of us one. Each of us all. You reach out across the void of otherness to me and you touch your own soul.
The American Indian Religious Freedom Act guarantees Leanard the right to be visited by a medicine man and to take part in sacred sweat lodge ceremonies.
You know, we have 4 rounds of ceremony, prayers and songs, and when we come out, we believe that have been purified. We come out anew and we start our life anew every time we come out of the sweat lodge.
In the darkness of a sweat lodge, his spirit is able to fly. But in 2000, law officials manipulated prison circumstances to cheat Peltier of his sweat lodge privileges. This adds to the many tortures Leanard must endure.
So other people just use it as a sauna, you mean?
Yeah.
Or anything.
Right. You know, and the thing is, if they go in there and violate some rules seriously, they'll take the sweat lodge out completely, and they know this is going to happen with different people, and it's their way of taking the sweat lodge away from us.
This is the tragedy of not having a sweat lodge in one's life. This is a tragedy that is suffered in total darkness. The spirit slowly dying. Sweat lodge is important to every one of us that live on this earth, and especially to the Lakota people, and especially to people who have been in jail, incarcerated for a long, long time.
The behavior of our government towards the incarcerated people in this country and elsewhere in sites in other countries is very, very disturbing to me. And the fact that Leonard becomes the symbol of the FBI and their so-called strong-arm tactics on the reservation in the 70s leaves me with a very disturbed feeling in my stomach about how we, as the so-called civilized people in control, how we mistreat those less fortunate, those of a different color, of a different background. This is very troublesome, and Leonard is the one that made me realize how important it is that people like Leonard Peltier be given some leniency, some opening for him to remain with the human race.
Well, no doubt Leonard Peltier represents the moral dilemma, not only for America, but for all other people that believe in justice, peace, and fairness throughout the world.
Listen to me. Listen. I am the Indian voice. Hear me crying out of the wind. Hear me crying out of the silence. I am the Indian voice. Listen to me. I speak for our ancestors. They cry out to you from the unstill grave. I speak for the children yet unborn. They cry out to you from the unspoken silence. I am the Indian voice. Listen to me. I am a chorus of millions. Hear us. Our eagle cry will not be stilled. We are your own conscience calling to you. We are yourself, crying unheard within you. Let my unheard voice be heard. Let me speak in my heart, and the words be heard, whispering on the wind to millions. To all who care, to all with ears to hear and hearts to beat as one with mine. Put your ear to the earth and hear my heart beating there. Put your ear to the wind and hear me speaking there. We are the voice of the earth, of the future, of the mystery. Hear us.
So what's left for us to do? I think that you ought to grab a pen, pencil, and write a letter to Obama and asking that Peltier be released. Now you don't even have to argue the guilt or innocence, because he is innocent. We believe he's innocent. But just the fact that he's been in there twice the amount of time that, well, he's done over 38 years in prison. And he needs to be free. Please, write a letter. Write a letter to Obama today.
chana pa o pa ge yo ha ki o pe lo extra to
So they have no excuses for doing what they're doing right now, and we need help.